Hey, Queen. I'm Faith Alaribe, the founder and host of the Sister Circle podcast. Around here, we have honest and real conversations about our health, mental health, and wellness, topics that deeply impact our lives as women of color, and all with the mission to provide the information, tools, and resources to fill up our wellness toolkits, make informed decisions, and to allow us to thrive in every area of our lives. So get ready to be enlightened, informed, and inspired. And go ahead and get comfortable, Queen. Consider this your official welcome to the Sister Circle. Hello, and happy last few days of 2021, y'all. I don't know about you, but 2021 was actually pretty good to me in many ways. But the way that it decided to wrap up, listen, it was utterly disrespectful. It was. A COVID scare at daycare turned into a full-blown COVID outbreak in my household. I am just grateful that the symptoms were mild and that everyone who was affected were all on the mend. But I'm not even about to lie. When I got that positive test result, I was shook. Like, I was shaking in my boots, scared, shook. But the more I just let go, I came to terms with the fact that I had absolutely no control over what was taking place. I felt better. So I, controlled what I could. I began and continued to clean and disinfect like crazy. I try to sneak in a nap if I can. And I'm just trying to say as positive as possible considering the hand that I have been dealt. Listen, most of all, I'm missing my workouts. I'm missing my me time, my Zen time, right? My Peloton. And so I am just trying to get a little bit better so that I can get back on my bike and I can get back well and kind of find that sense of normalcy, if you will, in my workout regimen. Anyhow, I was really determined to pull it together for this week's episode because it's really a conversation that I think is important to have, and particularly as we approach the new year. So a few months back, I read an article that was talking about how pandemic drinking had been soaring amongst Blacks, Hispanics, and moms of young children. So the largest increases in average consumption occurred among Black women at 173% and Hispanic women at 148%. Likewise, women with children that were younger than the age of 5 at 323%. Mind-blowing, although it's actually not really that surprising. Nevertheless, for this week's episode, I had the absolute pleasure of chatting with Kirsten Walker of Sober Brown Girls, a safe place for sober and sober-curious women of color. So we have a raw and honest conversation about the effects of not having a healthy relationship with alcohol. We also talk about how Kirsten used it as a coping mechanism for untreated depression and anxiety. We talk about the importance of just being real and honest and open about mental health with your children, and just so much more. I really enjoyed having this conversation, and I really think that it has the potential to touch many, many people who will listen to it. So I wanted to shed light on the topic of alcoholism and sobriety, as I know for certain that it is a topic that has impacted the lives of many women of color. And be it our own relationship with it, a parent's relationship, a partner, a friend's, a family member's, right? And because alcohol is something that is just greatly normalized in our society, I'm not sure that we really question our relationship with it or with other substances often enough. And personally, I've lost family members to alcoholism, young and old. And addiction is something that actually runs through both sides of my family. So I often explore and assess my relationship with alcohol, as I have also had my own struggles with it in the past. And I know that some folks kick off the new year with dry January, and maybe for some of you, you might want to scale it back a little in 2022. Maybe you want to kick the habit entirely, or maybe you just kind of want to explore what not drinking might look like. Either way, the conversation is quite timely, and it is oh so good. So I'm not going to delay anymore. Let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome to the Sister Circle, Kirsten.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, so wonderful. So, listen, I always start my interviews by setting an intention. So, for the women who will listen to this episode, what do you want them to take away from this?
I just want them to take away that it is okay to step back sometimes and look at our behaviors, look at our lives, and see what we can do to enrich our lives a little bit more. And that's all that I want them to take away, because I think when you start there, when you have that curiosity in yourself, I think that it's a very powerful experience. So that's exactly what I want them to take away.
I love that. I love that. So, who is Kirsten? Where are you from? What do you do? What's your mission?
Yeah, so Kirsten I have been in Richmond, Virginia my entire life, pretty much. I have been here since I was 5. So my entire life, I was a military brat, if you will. My dad was in the Air Force. So I was born in Arkansas and kind of lived in Germany for a little bit. And then from then on, I've been here. Just a country family girl. I am married. I've been married for almost, I think we're about to go to 17. I think when you get past a certain
Oh,
amount of years,
wow. 17
yeah,
years.
you just kind of just go with the flow. So I believe we're there. And yeah, I have 2 children. I have a 18-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. So mom of teens, 3 dogs, the partridge in the pear tree, all that good stuff.
I love it. I love it. I'm sure your household is very busy with the teenagers. I'm sure.
Oh my goodness. You know, every stage of childhood, I think, has come with its own challenges, but the teenage stage, I will say, has been the most challenging. But we're an open family, and I think that that makes everything so much better. And they're just turning into these amazing young adults and just turning into my friends. I'm still mom. Don't get
Right,
it
right.
twisted. But I'm really enjoying seeing them blossom into these young adults. So it's been really an interesting ride.
Well, that is so incredible. Yeah, it's all the way live at the Alaribe house with 2 little ones under 3. So I
Wait,
can't. So if
yes,
you can
yes.
remember, yes,
I
yes. If you
can
can
remember. I
recall.
can remember. I had a 2-year-old and a newborn. So I
Ooh, wee,
can
yes.
definitely remember those times.
Well, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's a special time of my life
Mm-mm,
for sure, for sure.
absolutely.
So tell me this, Kirsten, what led you to get sober?
So I kind of started my drinking career a little late in life. In college, I kind of, you go to the parties here and now, in college, and, you experience alcohol, and, then kind of came out of college, started my family pretty young. And it just was at first a weekend type thing, just because that was the normal thing to do. That's what I felt was the normal thing to do. That's what I grew up seeing, was alcohol in the weekends. And it kind of just progressed. It kind of progressed after I had my second child. I dealt with some postpartum depression that kind of lingered. It kind of just turned to just depression, as a whole, and anxiety. And probably about 2 years ago, I started kind of using alcohol to soothe those symptoms of alcohol and depression. So it turned out to just not be a weekend activity. It turned into, a after work type of activity. Come home, get into this routine of, you work hard all day, you come home, you got to kind of turn that work switch off, turn that mom switch up a little higher, because your mom all day long, even at work, but you got to kind of, turn it up a little bit higher and kind of be on your toes. And it just started to just be one of those things that I use to cure or to deal or cope, if you will, with that anxiety and depression. And it just started spiraling out of control to the point of, just throwing up more and blackouts more and waking up every morning, and just, you start waking up every single morning with a hangover. It just starts to wear you down. And so I had to make a decision about, am I going to continue this behavior, or am I going to do something about it? And it got to the point of one morning I had to take my mom to a medical appointment, and I could barely get up. to get her to where she needed to be. And that scared me, actually. That was the first time I got scared about my drinking. And I started pondering, what if this had been like a house fire? Or what if it had been an emergency for one of your kids? So your husband needed you and you physically could not be there to help them, support them. And that scared me into starting this journey. That's where it began.
So tell me this, when you were like experiencing kind of like you were in the throes of both your depression and anxiety, and you were using it as a coping mechanism, were there members of your family or were there like close friends that were like identifying or pointing out that your behavior had been different?
No, I'm very skillful in hiding how I feel. So, I did a lot of my drinking alone, or nobody really saw the amounts that I was drinking. And they saw me sleeping a lot, but they just figured, okay, she just probably is just overwhelmed and needs to rest. So nobody really saw it. Nobody really pointed it out. And I too didn't identify that it was a huge problem because, you see these things growing up and then you don't have some of these discussions about this behavior growing up. So I didn't feel like that it was a problem or anything was wrong until it was, and until it was getting out of control. So nobody really saw it. My husband every so often would say, okay, I think I'm going to take a month off from drinking. And that would anger me. It would really anger me because this is what I was starting to use as my coping mechanism, as my medication. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't take away what helps me function, if you will. And even at those times when I would get mad at him, I would really think about that anger. And why are you getting so mad? Why is it a problem that you could not take a month off from drinking? Like, what difference does that make? And why is it an issue? So again, at the end of kind of my drinking career, I kind of really thought about those times when I would get angry at him for wanting to take away, what I love so much. And that just screamed to me even more that I just didn't really need it in my life, to be that angry to take something as toxic as that away. So
was it a challenge for you to like taper off? Like, what happened?
I kind of just stopped cold turkey. I stopped right before, it's funny because I stopped January the 29th of 2020. So this was before everything with the pandemic just exploded.
Girl, so and you didn't have any challenges like in the middle of COVID?
I was so focused on everything that was going on. And so I had so much anxiety about everything that was going on because I was one of those people that was on CNN every day when stuff first happened. So I'm watching these numbers tick up and I'm just out of control. But then I would sit down and I would think about it and I would say, you were so much of a closet drinker. What would it look like right now? And so that really helped me as I'm going through this pandemic to not drink. Because as you know, so many people that were on their alcohol-free journeys, so many people relapsed. It was a high epidemic of people relapsing and people just starting to binge drink. And I knew that at that time, my family needed me to be, on top of my game. I've got 2 kids at that time that are now, doing school at home. I'm trying to keep on top of that. I've got one that's thriving that's doing it. I've got one that really struggled, last year with being at home. And I needed to be on top of my game. I needed to be on top of things to keep the house moving and running and keep some sense of normalcy going on. So surprisingly, it really wasn't as much of a struggle during the pandemic because I needed to be really on top of my game. So I knew that alcohol would have just made things I can't even imagine how I would have been last year if alcohol had been part of my life.
It's interesting. I actually was pregnant throughout COVID for the most part. So
yeah.
I didn't have no choice, right? But I also think that like for a lot of people that did become like a coping mechanism, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm actually really curious to know like to just go cold turkey. And I know that you said that you know you had to kind of pivot and focus on, you know, your household and making sure that it was running smoothly. But along those lines, like else were you managing your depression, your anxiety? Like that still is a real thing, right? So what were you
Yeah, and
doing to cope?
yeah, I do want to preface this by saying I am a type of person that is really big on harm reduction. So I won't say that I was perfect, because I think when you try to, have this sense of perfection is when you kind of put yourself, in this really bad position. So I won't say that I was 100% perfect during this time. There was a glass of wine here or a drink here or there, where I would kind of, fall back on old habits. It was never as bad as how it was when I was really in the throes of my drinking. But I did find so many other things to do, surprisingly, to help me with, my anxiety and depression. I mean, I started crafting, and girl, let me just tell you, I never ever was the type of person that just sat back and said, I really want to craft. So it was so funny, as I'm going through, Facebook and looking through different things, and I, spot these different crafts and these different ideas. And I ended up getting a Cricut machine, and
Oh,
girl,
you
I
got the
started
cricket.
making, girl, went insane. I think that machine right there just, it has helped me. I just have this emotional attachment to it, because there were so many nights that we just sit there, just me and my Cricut. And girl, I've been making pillows. I'm making all kinds of different things in the house. I know my husband is sick of me. Um,
Y'all got
but
family
I'm learning,
t-shirts and everything, right?
girl, I'm like, y'all can wear these t-shirts, okay? These are made by moi. You gonna rock this t-shirt. And they rocked them proudly. And I just started crafting. I started getting into shows. It's funny when you're drinking, you watch all these shows, and girl, I couldn't remember half the shows that I had watched previously. So I just got into these different shows, spent more time with my husband. You get so wrapped up in this everyday mundane way of doing things, and we just, even though we were all in the house together, we weren't spending time together. So we were able to spend more time together, just if it was just feeding the kids at a different time and us just eating together, or snuggling up on the couch and watching a movie together. We would really do different things there. We got another dog, so that took up a lot of we got a pandemic dog, so that took up a lot of time, having a new puppy in the house. And that's really, really how I spent my time, and just journaling, my journey, on Instagram, took up a lot of time. And just those things were really paramount, to me surviving, the last year.
That's really interesting. Like you came up with a lot of different ways to fill your time, and it seems like more meaningful time instead of like meaningless spent time, right? Hiding and stuff. I think about for folks who might be listening and might be like, I mean, that's great. You know, COVID, you know, allowed for you to do some, you know, incredible things and more thoughtful. But what were your biggest challenges that you faced, particularly early on during your sobriety? And when you were faced with these challenges, what were some of the tools or methods that you used that you really found to kind of, you know, help you through that process? I know you mentioned journaling.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges I had was actually feeling my feelings. I think that I had done so much to numb them. It was very eye-opening and sometimes a little overwhelming to actually feel my feelings and not run from them and deal with them. So I started getting, like you said, a lot into journaling. I even reached out to a doctor, and I started, seeing a therapist, and that
Yes, therapy.
really helped. I got properly medicated on what I actually needed. Instead of using alcohol, I got the proper medication to deal with my anxiety and my depression. So those were the things that were really, really helped me, deal with those challenges of all of a sudden these feelings starting to get rushed, and me actually having to sit down and deal with them. A lot of meditation, a lot of learning how to be present and it being okay to not dwell on the past and not, try to figure out the future, to just sit there in the moment and just be okay with not being okay sometimes, and just knowing that the feeling, it will go away, it will pass, it won't always, be here. So I really leaned on one particular quote by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And the quote is, nature has never created a storm that doesn't end. And that's absolutely correct. You think of, we had terrible rains this morning. I mean, it was torrential rains. And all of a sudden the sun just came out and everything just calmed down. And that's just how it is in life. The feelings, they will pass. The storm will not always be here. It will end.
Yes. And that's so important to know, like so important to know, because when you're in the throes of things, you feeling like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this.
Oh yeah. And you may not know in the throes of it. You may not have any kind of idea about how you're going to get out, but something turns the tides and it happens and you come out of it. Yeah.
I think that the last time that I actually started to explore therapy again, one of the reasons why I wanted to process a miscarriage, but also I wanted to address some of the behaviors that I felt weren't in association with what I felt would be a good mom. I'm using air quotes, but you know what I mean? And so one of those things was my relationship with alcohol. And so one of the things that, my therapist told me, she's like, hey, you gotta be able to feel. So why don't I challenge you, right, to, not use anything, whether it is, wine, herb, whatever it is, right, but just to like be in your feelings. And so that actually extended for a very long time. And it was just really interesting. It was like, for so long, I just didn't feel because I didn't want to. I was scared.
Yeah. And we're programmed. Where society tells us to not feel. It's easier just to go ahead and just numb as much as you can and just ride the wave until you come out of it. So not feeling, that's the popular way to do things. That's how I was, brought up. That's what I saw, to not feel. Yeah.
Yeah. To not feel, or to, lose all sense of inhibitions. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think that when you feel, it's not just pain that you're able to feel like immense joy. It's so different, like a joy that you are able to be present for. It's very different. It's very, very different.
I've even noticed it in nature. I've even noticed it that I would numb so much that I wouldn't be present, and I wouldn't even see the beautiful tree outside, or I wouldn't even acknowledge waking up and hearing the birds chirp. Literally hearing nature wake you up and say good morning to you. And like you said, you just that feeling of joy that we're missing out on. It's painful to think about that there are so many times that just missed out on just that beauty that's out there, just in nature.
You talked about the hiding of the addiction, right? And so when you think about that, like, to hide means that there is shame that's associated with it. Deep down on the inside that something is wrong with this behavior. That's why I don't want anyone else to see or to witness it, right? I think about having two little girls, right? And how my toddler in particular, oh gosh, little Mara. So it was so funny. So the other day, I'm putting her to bed and she's like, Mommy, I want to read, Llama Llama Red Pajama. I was like, okay, baby, go get your book off the bookshelf, right?
That's right.
So she comes over, she sits on the bed. I'm like, okay, give me the book. And she's like, no, I want to read the book. And I'm like, okay, all right, girl, go ahead and read the book. She literally, page by page, is quote unquote reading the book. She's only 2.5 years old, but she's reading it word for word using my intonation and everything. There's this one page where you open it up, there are no words, and Mama Llama's running up the stairs because baby Llama's made a huge little fussy, right? So she's running up the stairs and I'm always like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So she opens up the page and she's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And it just reminded me that she's paying attention to every single thing that I'm doing. Like, and she's normalizing those behaviors. And so it's kind of like the whole notion of like consciousness, like, okay, being aware of your behaviors. That's one of the things that you mentioned when we first started talking. And it's like, okay, so I don't know. It's something about having these little girls where it's like just having this mirror that's constantly up in front of you and you're like witnessing your behavior, right? And is this something that I want her to normalize? Is this something that I want her to think is okay?
Yeah, and by having teenagers, just seeing my behavior, it started to be a factor in why I wanted to, just stop the behavior of drinking daily, because that's what they were starting to see, was beginning to be a pattern. Because as much as you think you can hide it, you're not really hiding it. You might put some wine in a mug and think that you're doing something big, but they know just by your behavior. And I'll tell you how much they knew. And I didn't know they knew as much as when I stopped drinking. And they would say, Mom, you are a lot calmer. You're talking to us more. They were interacting with me more. I'll just go in my son's room sometimes, just lay in his bed and just be like, what you up to? What's going on? So those interactions were starting to happen more, and they were starting to notice it, and they wanted to make me aware of it. But it's really important that I want them to know that there are other ways to deal, with your frustrations, with your anxiety. We have conversations on anxiety and depression. It's just not me that deals with it in my household. And I'm able to recognize that now, and we're able to normalize that and that be okay. And we're able to work through it, be it therapy, be it medication, be it whatever is necessary to help.
And that's so good. That's so good. Because mental health is something that we are just not talking about. We are not talking about it enough. Yep. And that's how it shows up. It shows up in addiction. It shows up in anger. It shows up in like so many different ways, right? And it's like, yeah, it's real interesting. But yet, we normalize, having that drunk uncle or having that drunk cousin or, right? But we don't really address it. We might make him go lay down in the bed in the other room and not get in the car and drive. But that's just
the crazy uncle.
Yeah,
we just say that's just the crazy uncle. That's just how they act, or that's just auntie. That's just how she acts and how she behaves. And it's like,
no, auntie is depressed. Uncle has PTSD, right? Daddy got, whatever. And it's just like, we have to do that. Because I don't know if you know this, but I read a statistic the other day. I want to make sure that I read it correctly, but it was talking about the percentage of African-American or Black folk between the ages of 18 and 24 that commit suicide. And the statistic was just like mind blowing. Like,
I could only imagine.
And it's just like, why do Black women have to feel like we always got to be strong? Like, no, I want to be soft.
I want to be soft. I want to be cradled. I want to be just handled with care and with gentleness. And so it's very, very important in this household that we have those discussions. When I first came out and was diagnosed with depression, somebody said to me, what do you have to be depressed about? And that was a close family member. And said, what do you have to be depressed about? Nobody wants to feel this way. Trust me, when I am going through my lowest of lows, it's not fun. It is crippling. It's not fun at all. So, I'm able to have those conversations with my children, and, I'm able to run to their aid and to recognize certain things in them. And, we're able to work, past those situations and really get to the remedy that we need to get to. But yeah, we normalize those things up in here, because I'm not going to have my son or daughter feeling like they don't know what's going on with them, or that they're broken, or that they're wrong, or that, something else is going on. And this could, just be something internal that it's just like a broken leg. It's no different than having a broken leg. This is just something that's different, but it's okay.
And it is, yeah, it's absolutely okay. I found the statistic. So the statistic is that in 2019, suicide was the second leading cause of death for Blacks or African Americans ages 15 to 24.
Yeah, because we don't have the conversations we don't need to have, and we're getting better. I will say we are.
I think that it's a combination of conversations as well as the resources, because, you know, the reality is if you don't have insurance, right, how are you going to get your medication?
And sometimes insurance is
Yeah,
sometimes it's still an issue.
it's
It's just,
exactly.
girl,
For real, you know. And
still
so
can
I
be a
mean
problem.
that's real, and it's sad, and people are out here like struggling,
Because
contemplating losing their lives.
I'm on one medication, and the pharmacist and I are looking at each other like, if we didn't have the coupons or the insurance or the way to get around this, she was like, most people can't. I was in awe of it, and she said, you'd be surprised. A lot of people cannot. They're prescribed this, and they can't get it. They can't get it.
I know, and it is so sad, and it's like, how do we, I don't know, one of the questions that I ask myself often is like, how can I find a way to provide resources so that people can access therapy, so that people can get medication that need it, right? And it's like, I don't know what can be created. Tell me this. I am curious a little bit to know. Did you have any fears about getting sober? Like, were you
Oh,
scared of
absolutely.
anything?
Oh, terrified. Terrified because you're taking this crutch, away. And so in the beginning, you're like, well, what do I do to replace that? If I don't drink, it's so easy to drink. So what in the world do I do to replace that? And it really took me stepping outside of my comfort zone. It really took the research to really find those things that could take the place of alcohol. And it's terrifying because especially when you go on this cycle of, drinking, waking up, feeling, awful about yourself. And you tell yourself that morning, I'm not going to do this again. This is not going to happen again. I'm not going to continue with this behavior. But then you turn around that evening and you do the same thing again. So it's really a fear of failure. It's a fear of a fear of resistance. Like, am I actually going to be able to carry on with this and do this? So yeah, there was so much fear and anxiety that I built up, to quit, even, I like to say to start the journey, a lot of fear and anxiety that was built up.
What would you say, aside from no hangovers and things like that and being more present, what's changed most since you've gotten sober?
I think what's changed most is I'm definitely more of an advocate for myself. I try to get out of this whole people pleasing and not creating boundaries. And now I don't people please, and I have boundaries up every which way. And I think that's been so instrumental. It's been so productive to just create these boundaries that, when I need time for myself, I take that time for myself. When, I need to say no to something, I say no to something. And it's been very empowering to learn how to create those boundaries. Is one of the things that I do the most research on now, is being okay with saying no, with creating those boundaries, with individuals. Has it changed some relationships in my life? Yeah, it's changed some friendships. It's changed some hard conversations needed to be had. But I think I'm definitely better for it. Definitely more healthy for it. So I'd say the boundary creation has been one of the biggest changes that I've had.
Listen, boundaries change lives for sure.
Woo,
Boundaries
baby.
change lives for sure. So when you were kind of like, I'm gonna say, like, not in the throes, but when you were just in your addiction, how long were you in your addiction, and did it have any implications on your health at all?
Yeah, so I would say it was about a good 3 years that things were, I like to say, a bit out of control. And yeah, I'm definitely more healthier for it because I take the time to care for myself more now. That's even as simple as making doctor's appointments or dentist appointments or eye appointments. I just let all those things, slide under the rug. I was so excited this year. I turned 40 and I was so excited. Like 2 weeks ago, I had my mammogram. I had my first mammogram.
Yes.
And I felt
Get
just
them
like
titties
a
checked, girl.
grown woman just to have my boobs smashed up. It was just the most amazing thing. And just some things have been discovered. I've been able to take care of some things that, and still just healing my body and taking care of things that need to be taken care of. And it just feels so good to just make those appointments and just check in on myself and do the things that, I need to do with my therapist, with managing my medication. Those things have been just amazing. So yeah, I just felt like such a grown woman,
Yes,
just
good for you. And happy
taking care of
belated.
myself. Yes,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you.
Cheers to the big 4-0. So one of the terms that I keep on hearing is like sober curious. What exactly is sober curious? I think I might be sober curious, but I'm kind of curious to
Yeah.
know, how would you define it?
I kind of define sober curious as just taking stock of your drinking habits. That's just asking the question, does this benefit me? Is it helping the situation? How much is going on? How do you feel, when you drink, or how do you feel when you don't drink? Like just taking accountability, for the behavior in the relationship with alcohol is how I look at it.
And so what about the folks who are like, okay, you know what? Kirsten then hit a nerve. And I really think that this is something that I want to explore. What steps would you suggest that someone take to explore a journey towards sobriety?
Yeah, I think there are some magnificent books out there that are really good. I know one of my favorites is Quit Like a Woman by Holly Whitaker. It's one of the first books that I read. And I think things like that are just looking at that book really meant a lot to me because it really looked at just women and how we're somewhat targeted by big alcohol, especially mothers. You have this definitely this huge mommy wine culture, that goes on. Another one that really, 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 really knocked my socks off was This Naked Mind. And with This Naked Mind, it really looks at the brain and it looks at your body and what alcohol does to the brain and to the body, and why it is so hard to stop the behavior, to quit drinking. That it's just it's not a issue of morality. You're not a bad person because you can't stop drinking. It's literally some changes that are going on within the body and within the brain. And so a lot of those books, I listened through, audiobook. I've got the physical book, I just kind of dig into that. And one of the things is just, I always tell people, just do the research on the effects alcohol has, on the body. You'd be surprised at what it does as soon as it hits your tongue. And the fact that our bodies really aren't, they're not huge fans of alcohol.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So just kind of starting to do that research is really where I tell people to really, if they are sober curious, to really get started at.
Yeah, I'm happy that you made mention of that, because I think that for a lot of times, people think that, oh, the only way that you can stop is if you go to AA. Right. And it's just like, I want folks to know about different resources that are out there that may be counter to, their belief system, or, just might be a different vibe. And I think especially for Black women or, just other women of color, to be able to find spaces in which, they can feel confident and comfortable, which actually leads me to my next question. And that's about the community that you've actually created through your blog. And so can you talk to us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So initially, when I started this journey, I, wanted to find community. I wanted to tell somebody, just scream it to somebody that I've got this dependency on alcohol. It's unhealthy. And I want to stop. I want to just, go into harm reduction and really stop this, behavior. And so looking around, I, started to look on Instagram, and I noticed this huge, huge sober community on Instagram, which was amazing. I really connected with so many amazing, beautiful women, But the one thing that I noticed right off the bat was a lot of them did not look like me. And so I said, okay, wait a minute, it's got to be more out there that feel the way that I feel. When you look at all these accounts and you look at all these women, and even authors of books, they're all white women. And so I wanted to just create this community that I knew was out there. I wanted to create this safe place for women of color to come to. Whether you are sober curious or you're just all and out sober, to just come and this is a safe place, for you. This is somebody looks like you that is questioning their relationship with alcohol. It's fine. We can do this together. We can go through this together. And that's where Sober Brown Girls kind of was born from, just from me sharing my experience and me just wanting to create a safe place for other women of color.
That's so beautiful. Tell me, is it or was it hard to begin to tell your story?
It was, yeah, because there was so much shame that I had at the beginning. And so it was hard, but when I started seeing all these other women out there that were sharing their stories, it made it so much easier, because I think there's so much power in us sharing our stories and sharing our truth. And so with that, I knew that my story could be the beginning of someone else's story, so it made it even easier for me to share what I was going through, rather than being good or bad, because every post it's not fluff, every post is not all funny, or every post is not me smiling. I really get into the depths of how you feel some days. Some days are just more rockier than others. And so it just got easier and easier to share my story when I realized that this could really impact other people's lives.
That is so beautiful. I think that, from mental health to addiction to, fertility issues, all sorts of things, we go through so much. And what I will say is one of the main reasons why I created this platform was to make sure that women did not feel alone in those experiences, right? That are often woven in shame and considered to be taboo. And it's like, I will say this though, it is so scary at times, because it's like, I don't know if it's like a vulnerability, like hangover, because, you share so much of yourself and that it's impacting somebody, right? It, but like the process and like just facing it face on and sharing so much of yourself can be so terrifying.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Especially on those first few posts when I, would get real about, y'all, it's rough out here right now. I don't know. I don't know. And it's hard because social media sometimes, especially with social media, especially with Instagram, it's always normalized to put your best foot forward. Nobody wants to see the bad or the negative, so it's hard to really put yourself out there. But then every time that I did, I'm always shocked at the support and the love that I get and the thank yous that I get for just, girl, that I thought I was just the only one that was feeling that way. Or yeah, some days are like this. Or thank you for just being truthful and being honest. That's what people need. That's what we all need, is truth and honesty.
Absolutely. And just realness and authenticity. And I think that that's one of the things that stood out most to me about you, is just like, oh, this queen is over here authentic, being real, like, and did it in the middle of COVID, and so
Girl.
that's another level of, that's another level of resilience. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And all that you've created. And even if it just makes someone pause and reflect for just a moment, that's so worth it.
Because I get excited when people just say, I still drink, but girl, I don't drink as much as I used to. I'm elated. It's not about being perfect. It's just about progress.
Yes.
That's just amazing right there, just to say, I'm not doing what I used to, or I noticed over the pandemic, I really got out of control, but I'm really taking notice of it and really, being present, in my behavior. So that's huge to me. That's a huge, huge win.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Definitely a huge win. So I know that you've got a new book that's out.
Yeah,
Tell me about the
yeah.
book. Tell me about the book. I want to know all about it.
So over the pandemic, just kind of put these thoughts together. It's called More Than Curious. And it's just like your beginner's guide to really those first, few weeks of starting to look at your relationship with alcohol or sobriety, full on. What does it feel like? What are some things that you can do to kind of help you to cope and to get through those first few weeks? Because that's where it's hard. That's where the rubber meets the road. And that's where it can be really troubling. It can feel very lonely. It can be very overwhelming. So I just wanted to create just something that people could kind of turn to that's an easy read, quick read, to kind of get you over those first few weeks and kind of help you to cope and to deal with this new lifestyle. And then along with it, I wanted to add some information about journaling. It was one of those things that really helped me in the beginning and continues to help me. So I wanted to add a little bit about journaling and kind of just give you some kind of, journaling prompts to kind of help you begin that journey. So that's where it sprung out from. It kind of sprung from the blog and it's kind of like the blog 2.0. It's kind of like an explosion from there, and it's just packaged up nicely in one nice little pretty package. So it's just another way for me to lend a helping hand to those that are curious or starting their own journeys.
Definitely. And, I think that journal prompts, it's like people were like, oh, a journal prompt, it's, I can Google it. It's like, I don't think that folks understand just like the power of just a question that you never would have thought about. I mean, so I'm doing this like 100 days of self-love and optimal health and wellness, right? I gifted that to myself for my birthday.
Nice.
And yeah, girl, and it has been transformative. Like I've been journaling and it has been like this huge sense of self-awareness that I don't know that I was particularly ready for, but it's just like, wow, like, because it's just like, it's this free flow, right? And it's like the things that come up, they bubble up and you write through it. Right? You're feeling it in that moment, you're writing it out, and it's like, oh my gosh, like I never knew or I never recognized that I spoke to myself like that, or that I thought about this situation in that way. Right. And it's just like, it can be just so powerful. So I can only imagine that the prompts that you created, especially around one's relationship with alcohol, I'm sure that it's probably really, really good. So I'll be sure to leave the note for that in the show notes so that people can access that as well as can access your blog. But I do have one last question for you. I know that you said, one of the places in which people can start is to be in, asking the question around their relationship with alcohol. And then, you recommended 2 books, but are there any other tools or resources, whether it's a podcast, a group or whatever, that you would recommend for someone who wants to, dig in a little bit more in depth as it relates to their sobriety and exploring it?
One group that really sticks out to me, and just to fully disclose, I'm actually a recovery coach with Tempest. Yeah. And what I loved with Tempest is what I love about them is they take a really holistic approach.
Wait, what is Tempest?
So Tempest it's a community that helps you kind of approach your sobriety from a holistic level. So you're looking at relationships, you're looking at behaviors, you're looking at habits and rituals, you're looking at all these things. And get together. We have some amazing groups and some amazing discussions. And I've got a group tonight, and my Friday group is one of my favorite groups, because I mean it's that Friday, it's the end of the week, it's that day that most people drink the most. So we get together and just kind of go over the week and go over our plans for the weekend and any struggles or wins, that we've had. It's just got a great online community. I love it because every month there's a new type of topic or a new, feature that goes up every month. And I just love that it comes from such a loving place of, it's not about all or nothing. It's really about taking this one day at a time. If something happens and you slip, just know that it's okay. look at all the sober days, that you've had. It's something I'm really big on right now. Look at all the sober days, that you've had compared to the days that you drank. And you'd be surprised at how many of those days you have in your bucket. So I really, really have loved being in partnership with them.
So Tempest.
Yes.
Okay.
Tempest. Yeah. Just if you look up Tempest recovery, they'll pop right on up.
For those who are interested in connecting with you and, whether your book or checking out your blog, how can they do so?
So you can find me on Instagram at Sober Brown Girls or soberbrowngirls.com. And that's where you can find the book. You can read around in the blog. You're more than welcome to do that. I've even got a little shop there that has some kind of nice sober swag, if you will. That you can definitely, a lot of people kind of get a kick out of that, just to help kind of normalize, so much mommy wine juice mugs out there and t-shirts that kind of normalize drinking. Well, I want to normalize sobriety and normalize recovery, normalize harm reduction. So, that's out there too. So you're more than welcome to find me there too.
Well, listen, Kirsten, it has been an absolute pleasure connecting with you this Friday afternoon. It's actually raining over here as well. So it's been an absolute delight. And thank you so much for sharing your story, as well as sharing, your story with the world. I think that it's so important. So thank you for being a part of this movement.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for creating this amazing platform for women. We need more of you, so much more of you in the world. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Queen. Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, be sure to follow or subscribe to the show to make sure that you never miss a new episode. And also be sure to share the episode or podcast with another queen who might benefit. And before I go, I need your help. Please be sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review wherever you consume your podcast. This way, more women are able to find the show and access the information that we share here. Also, if it's on your heart to buy me a coffee, any support that you're willing to provide to help me sustain this podcast is greatly appreciated. In the meantime, you can always follow us on all social media platforms at The Sister Circle Podcast, as well as via the website, thesistercirclepodcast.com. With love, Faith.